and I will also be the organizer for today's presentation. We are happy to welcome today's presenter, Jim Smith, Senior Travel Industry Consultant with Special Needs Group, who will be joining us rather than Special Needs Group's Travel Industry Ambassador, Ms. Karen Leonard. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few important features on your screen that will allow you to interact with us via the web today. We will be answering your questions at the end of this presentation. To ask a question, you will be using your GoToWebinars pane. Near the bottom of this pane, there is an area that says Questions. If you click on the arrow next to where it says Questions, it will open up a window pane. This is what you will use to communicate with us. If you're having trouble hearing the presentation, please make sure that your speakers are turned all the way up. And if that does not rectify the problem, please try hanging up and then dialing back in again. You can send me any technical issues via this questions pane, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability via the same pane. Please note that all audience members are muted. We certainly want to hear from you all, but we have so many people on today's call that the background noise would be prohibitive, and we want to ensure that everyone can hear the entire presentation. Remember, one of today's lucky webinar attendees will win a $100 Visa gift card. In order to do so, you must be on the presentation from beginning to end, and we will be announcing the winner live after our question and answer session. Finally, please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available for your on-demand viewing pleasures on asta.org by early next week. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Jim.
Why, Cara, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, thank you so much for affording us your time, because it is your most valuable commodity. You're muted. After the last webinar I did, the audience requested that I be muted, but no such luck. We're going to have some fun today, and I'm only going to take about 35, maybe 36 minutes of your time for the presentation, because it's not how long we can talk, it's how much information is really meaningful. And what we've done is we've taken an online certification program that was designed almost 7 years ago now to assist travel professionals to better assist not only the disability and the special needs market, but just scores of millions of customers and potential customers that have mobility challenges, respiratory challenges. We came up with a 3-module online certification program. There is a brief test after each of the modules. What we're doing today is what we call a jump start. And if you're already certified, we have a couple of new things that you might find interesting, so it's always great to review. And after viewing and listening to today's presentation, it'll really put you in a great position to accelerate your certification. And without stealing too much more thunder, any questions, just throw them in the chat box and we'll get back to them at the end of the presentation. And I've been doing this in the industry for about 48 years. I'm proud to be a certified travel industry executive. I'm proud to be an ASTA member. I've gone to about 28 ASTA World Congresses and was just at the one in DC. And we're going to have people from the Special Needs Group team at a lot of ASTA events come the coming years to come, because we've got a very special relationship. So let's dive in. Today's goals. Well, you know what? Right-sizing your expectations is important. So right out of the box, we're not trying to make you medical professionals. Rest easy. Being a travel professional is tough enough. But we are going to introduce you to the world's fastest growing demographic, and hopefully along the way enhance and ramp up some of your existing sales skills. Because, you know, everybody tells us we need to differentiate. I was a retail agent for 6 years of my career, still dabble here and there for friends. I help them out. But everyone tells us we have to differentiate. We have to add value. You know, we got to be different from the web. But what we're going to cover here today is definitely going to help you do both. And I'm going to ask you, I'll get down on my knees if I have to ask you, to become certified with us, because there's a lot in it for you and your clients. And you're going to learn how to serve the fastest growing segment of the business. And you know what? That's who we call accessibility pup, disability dog, but it really is a whimsical portrayal of the spirit of Americans with disabilities. because disability typically does one of two things to people. I was a corpsman in the Navy at the tail end of Vietnam. I got a little experience in this regard. Disability will typically shut you down because most disabilities are not congenital. We're not born with them. They develop over time. And once we get past the what the heck just happened to me effect, then the human spirit kicks in and it tends to be indomitable. And you know what? Once people accept their situation, adjust to the new normal, which the overwhelming majority do, these are the people that truly have a lust for life. They're the type that experiential travel was crafted for. Give them a rollyboard, some mobility equipment, a whimsical scarf, some munchies. Hopefully there's hydration there someplace for the puppy, and they're on their way. And the certification program, as I referenced, is less than 7 years old. We're delighted to have certified over 4,900 of your peers out there, and we do hope you join us as we strive to reach 5,000 by our 7th anniversary of the program. And you know, it's interesting. I've been blessed to be in the industry for as long as I've had. I've had a lot of really cool jobs. And one thing I realized back to my days as a travel advisor at a leisure retail agency on Long Island, storefront in a high traffic shopping district, the minute you sign on for a job in this business, by default, we become industry ambassadors. Just think about it. You go to cocktail parties, socially, not in the industry. You go out to dinner with friends, family. Invariably, somebody's going to pop a travel question at you if they know what you're doing for a living. And these next three, I don't care if we're talking about your significant other, your kids, whatever. Everybody wants you to provide value, fill their needs, and solve their problems, it seems, but especially in our professional capacity. Because if the stuff could do it itself, they wouldn't need us. And the brand manager thing, you know, it's funny. These days, the distribution paradigm has changed, and we have everybody from totally independent ICs to hosted ICs to employees in brick and mortar shops to franchisors and consortia. And I don't care what your affiliation might be. Obviously, you're affiliated with Astor, which is a strong brand, but the biggest brand that you need to manage is your brand, because you're an individual who is making a living as a sales professional. And that's a heck of a brand to have to manage. And you know, along the way of managing some great sales organizations and being part of some great sales organizations in my career, I learned that the best salespeople do one thing extraordinarily well. They ask great questions, because it's really critical to ask the right questions, qualify, probe a little bit, get underneath the client's epidermal layer and just find out what makes them tick. And the best salespeople ask great questions, then they shut up and they take some short notes. And when necessary, they ask the follow-up questions. And with these market segments, ladies and gentlemen, you might have to ask one or two questions that are outside the normal routine if you're going to provide the high level of customer service that keeps us in business. Let's talk about the market segments, okay? This is module one we're going to dive into. Who are these people? Well, basically, the short answer is it's everybody. Because disability, special needs, it impacts almost every one of us. Families with young kids, returning vets, the elderly, pre- and post-surgical patients are great candidates for mobility equipment. And then you have the occasional, I wrenched my back, twisted my knee, broke my ankle, going on vacation in a week or two. It's not going to go down the way I originally envisioned it. And believe it or not, Special Needs Group is the world's premier provider of rental mobility equipment, oxygen, and all those sorts of good stuff we'll get into later. And the biggest market segment we service are not the chronically disabled, and they're not necessarily people with chronic special needs, but they're slow walkers, and that's usually a direct result of either arthritis, COPD, neuropathy, or obesity. And then in another category altogether, we got those people with 24/7, 365 disabilities. And like I mentioned, disability doesn't care who you are, where you're from, what you look like, who you love, how you do it, who you voted for. If disability wants you, unfortunately, it's going to get you. Now, it does have one market demographic it tends to favor, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, let's get into something that's real important on the test, and it's a watershed event, really, in American history. And that was the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it was enacted, this is the big date, 1990. And they amended it a little bit, put some more teeth into it, if you will, in 2008. But what it was put in place to do was to protect the civil rights of Americans with disabilities. And anecdotally, purely anecdotally, it was modeled very closely after the Civil Rights Act in 1964 in that regard, in some regards. And I was part of a volunteer organization that contributed largely to the language of ADA. Shame they're no longer around, but we did good work once upon a time. Anyhow, what ADA did is it removed barriers, and if any of you were around in 1980 and you were paying attention, you remember the United States looks very different in many respects from the way it looks today, because ADA said we got to get rid of these barriers that are really impeding these people from having the ability to live a full and complete life. And if you think back to the day, as we say, there were no cutouts in street curbs, so people in mobility equipment could do something as simple as walk across a street and get over the curb. We didn't have handrails in restrooms and hotel showers. We didn't have ramps going into buildings, and we didn't even have handicapped accessible parking spots in supermarkets, strip malls, retailing areas. So ADA was really a game changer in so many respects. And what it does is it prohibits discrimination due to a disability. Now, the breadth and scope of disabilities is really broad, really vast, but for the purposes of what we do professionally as industry representatives and sales and service folks, I'm going to break it into two 40,000-foot high-level categories. And the first, if you're in the moment and you're engaged and you're paying attention, physical disabilities are pretty easy to detect because we're talking about mobility, stamina, sight, hearing, and speech. And those are readily detectable for the most part, but back to my hospital corpsman days in the Navy, we used to say, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's necessarily not there. And in the invisible category, we have emotional, nervous disorders, learning disorders, or as I refer to them, the alphabet series, your ADDs, your ADHDs, your OCDs, just a ton of invisible disabilities. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, addictive disabilities also fall into the invisible category. And this means nothing for the test, but I was reading an article a few months back that said in about another 5 years, invisible disabilities will outpace physical disabilities in the United States. So it's part of your probing and qualifying again to figure out what the client really needs, as opposed to what the client thinks they want. Now, all the stuff on this slide is good to know. Just wrap your head around the concept is all I'll ask you. What ADA basically says is that virtually everything has to be accessible that's public and commercial. That's pretty much the whole end game. The workplace needs to be accessible. The post office, Department of Motor Vehicles, City Hall has to be accessible. Everything from Taco Bell to the whole strip mall to Yankee Stadium has to be accessible. Telecom services have to provide for the deaf and hard of hearing, and there's an enforcement component. But that's just, you have to understand, this is all encompassing in the land of commercial and public. We talked about buildings and facilities a little bit, transit vehicles, everything from the New York City subway to the trolley cars of San Francisco to the trams at Knott's Berry Farm, the monorail at Disney World, MARTA in Atlanta. If it's public, it needs to be accessible. Now, the good news is for business owners that have to be in compliance, the government does provide assistance and training. They don't expect businesses and corporate entities to figure this out on their own. And there are two components of enforcement. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing these days. It's a thing. The Department of Justice and Transportation both oversee the ADA guidelines. Now, underneath the copy, you see just images, lexions, and icons, logos, if you will, that have become part of our vernacular in the last 28 years. And you know what? The interesting thing about this market segment is it cuts with two sides of the sword. There's an economic, compelling reason, and there's also the feel-good reason why a lot of us got in this business in the first place. The numbers, though, are staggering. I'd like to just take you through the numbers of Americans with disabilities, because people, more often than I care to hear, often refer to this as a niche market. Well, fully 20% of the U.S. population has a chronic disability. That's 63 million people. And I'm sorry, folks, but you give me 63 million of anything, and I'll take it in roll change, and it's not a niche. It's a significant market segment. And when you break it down, just in terms of what does this market spend and what's it all about, these numbers are old. Some recent research came out. We're going to be updoing the presentation, but for the purposes of the test, the market, just disability alone, represents $220 billion in discretionary or disposable income. Of that, they spend $13.6 billion a year on vacations. That translates to 32 million vacations. And here's the real kicker. Over 24 million Americans with disabilities say that they would travel or travel more frequently if their needs were better met. Now, we've met agents and advisors and travel professionals since I've been consulting to Special Needs Group now for 7.5 years that have no idea that this market is anywhere near the size that it is. And the interesting thing about this market, having been around it most of my life, for one reason or another, is that they tend not to behave like your typical client. They just want to have their needs met. And here's where it gets a little dicey, because as travel people, we tend to be people, and we're very empathetic. And if you see somebody with a pronounced disability, your first natural reaction might be to do something like say, "Oh dear, you poor thing, are you okay?" Very well intentioned, right? Well, that's the worst thing you can do, because all this market segment wants is to be treated like everybody else. They want your attention, they want your respect, they want your best effort, they want your professionalism. And they just want to be treated like everybody else and have their needs met along the way. And a lot of folks don't know that there are ways to take care of their needs that enable them to travel. From the business side back of the equation, back to the business side, it's important to note of those 63 million people taking those 32 million vacations a year, 85% of that travel is conducted with other people. Rarely does this market travel by themselves. Now, a little earlier I mentioned that disability has one market segment it tends to favor. Well, disability, folks, currently impacts 1 in 5 households in the United States, providing that no household member has yet reached the age of 65. Because when you think about it, these things that house our spirits and our souls, these things we call bodies, they're machines. And if you've ever driven a new car off a showroom and kept it for 10 years, it doesn't drive the same. So the moral of the story is once one person in the household hits age 65, the incidence of disability jumps from 1 in 5 families to 1 in 4 families. And I was doing a live presentation one day, and a gentleman in the back of the room interrupted me. He says, "Wait a minute, Jim." He says, 1 in 5 is 20% and 1 in 4 is 25%. So I knew he was a calculus major. He said, "That's only a 5% difference." I said, "Right, please take that 5% and bounce it off the number of households in this country." And it's a staggering number, ladies and gentlemen. So the moral of the story on this one is, as we age, we have more needs. And I was watching the football playoffs here a few years ago in South Florida. And the most frequently rotated local commercial, it wasn't a national buy, it was a local buy of the advertising, was for the Stryker prosthetic knee. I'm 63, looking for body parts that used to exist in my 30s, and wondering where some of the other ones went, because things aren't the same as they used to be in a lot of respects. Then there's a market segment that I technically should be part of, but I steadfastly refuse to join. Mature Americans, and we're good for another 340 million trips a year. Now, when I was a retail agent back before computers hit travel agencies, no kidding, the first Sabre demonstration installation was just being installed on the North Shore of Long Island at Jeffrey's Travel as I was leaving retail. When I was in retail, clients needed to have 2 attributes for me to fall in love with them before I even met them. One was time, the other was money. And ladies and gentlemen, I kid a little bit when I do my work, but the truth of the matter is, when you look at the mature market, and The disability, special needs, and mobility challenge segments, they tend to have both time and money. And smack in the middle of all this nonsense is my generation, the baby boomers, those of us born between January 46 and December of 1964. A whole bunch of us, 85 million in North America, 74 million in the States, 11 million up north in friendly Canada. And on January 1st, 2011, 7.5 years ago, we started turning 65 at the rate of 10,000 a day. And it doesn't stop until December 31st, 2030. And globally, it's the fastest growing demographic, or the mature market. Now, the millennials are huge. The matures and what's turning into the disability, special needs, and occasional mobility challenge market is vast. And, you know, these are the numbers behind baby boomers. But I'll take it a step further because I was born in 1955, smack in the middle of the boom. And I remember taking the first commercial flight I was 8 years old with my mom in 63. And we were flying from Phoenix to, at that point, I don't think it was JFK yet. It was still Idlewild Airport in New York. And folks, everybody on that plane looked like they were going to weekend religious services, weddings, wakes, whatever, because they're dressed to the nines. And the only people you see dressed like that on airplanes today are travel professionals hoping to get upgraded to first class. Everybody else is in yoga pants, shorts, sandals, flip-flops, God knows what. The baby boomers were the ones that grew up with travel as a birthright, largely due to the Airline Deregulation Act of 78-79. We were also the generation that was marketed to at the marketing pitch by Burger King, have it your way. And we're like, what? We don't have to have it the way you've been telling us we have to have it? Let's get this straight. You mean you're telling me I can have it the way I actually want it? How cool is that? And that begat the age of personalization. And the end game on this one is boomers are coming into just a tremendous amount of intergenerational wealth transfer. A lot of it's going to stay with the 1% that generated it, about 89%. But that might make a case for going after luxury travelers. But the bottom line is this is a sustainable market. Baby boomers refuse to grow up in many cases. I might be the poster child for that one. But we want what we want, and we've got the time. We've paid our dues. Now it's time to have some fun. Kids are out of college. Yeah. And again, it's critical to ask the right questions. That's the end of the first module. We're going to run through the next two. And number 3, you're not going to get. We're just going to talk about it. Never overestimate or underestimate anybody's intelligence is the setup for this slide. The next two, actually. If you have a client that's not really an experienced traveler, and you say to them, you know, you're going on a cruise out of Port Everglades, and what we'd like to do is put you in this really nice oceanfront hotel about 15 minutes from the port. It's in Hollywood, Florida. It's called the Diplomat. And that client might think to themselves, wow, an oceanfront hotel is an oceanfront hotel, and I'm going to see the ocean. And they will, as long as they're on the right side of the hotel to see the ocean. Now, as it happens at the Dip, if you're on the side that faces west and not east, you get a lovely view of Florida's Intracoastal Waterway, Broward County, out to the Everglades, and you get to watch the new big Hard Rock Hotel, Guitar Hotel, be built just by the airport. So the reason we use this slide is you could look at equipment that this market uses, and Module 2 takes you through some of the equipment that better familiarize you with it. And unless you have a reason to know this stuff, and unless you have a reason to know it, there's no reason to know it. They'll say a wheelchair is a wheelchair. Next image on top, coming to the right, is a scooter. That next thing we got there with the joystick, that's a power chair. Then you have a walker, and a walker has 2 wheels in the front. Sometimes you'll see tennis balls on these guys. And the next thing looks like a walker, but it's all souped up. It's called a rollator. And the difference is it has 4 wheels and handbrakes, and it's even got a fold-down seat in case somebody loses stamina and needs to chill out for a bit. But I think, and I'm not sure on this one, that Fendi, Michael Kors, or Gucci had a hand in the design of this thing because it's something that resembles a purse or a shopping bag there. And it's great for souvenir collecting as long as it's not too large. The beach chair, Joy on the Beach, this thing is so super cool. We'll talk about that later. But everything from shower commodes to shower chairs, patient lifts, chairs that my mom actually had one of these chairs. If your hips, knees, or feet are shot, and she was 3 for 3, she had 17 replacement surgeries for rheumatoid arthritis. She had one of these, and it helps you get into a standing position from a sitting position, hospital beds, and then oxygen in a variety of shapes, sizes, and delivery methodologies. So you might look at this stuff and say, yeah, Jim, it's all pretty much the same, but some of it is, and folks, some of it isn't. And this is what you need to know as a professional travel advisor, especially if you're putting people on cruises. Wheelchairs, scooters, and power chairs, ladies and gentlemen, all come in 3 sizes. Standard, heavy duty, and bariatric. Just think bariatric biggest, okay? So you got standard, heavy duty, and bariatric. And the one thing that differentiates them within their own category is they're each rated by weight. So a standard can handle up to so much human being, a heavy duty handles that much plus, and a bariatric that much plus plus. And it's important that you're aware that there are differences. But where the rubber meets the road is everything you see highlighted in red. If you have clients going on a cruise and they're in any of these 5 pieces of equipment, any size power chair, but only the largest, the bariatric, the biggest scooter, and the biggest wheelchair, any of those 5 pieces in red require an accessible stateroom on a cruise ship. No choice. And there's a very simplistic reason for it. Standard cruise cabin doorways are not wide enough to accommodate these 5 pieces of mobility equipment. So one of the questions you might have to ask clients that you've never asked them before, how much do you weigh? The next question you have to ask yourself probably is, how much do I need to round up? Nobody tells you the correct weight. Anyhow, you got walkers and rollators. They come in different sizes, and we'll walk you through all this stuff if you ever need it. But Joy on the Beach, I want to call your attention to, because as a travel professional, this is a game changer. Comes in a duffel bag, takes me about 2.5 minutes to put it together, and I'm mechanically reclined. Average person takes between 1.5 minutes and 2 minutes. We've had contests doing this stuff. It's fun. The frame is made out of extruded aluminum, the same thing they make planes from, so it's very lightweight and extraordinarily durable. The meshes are very comfortable, but also equally durable, quick-dry mesh. You'll notice we even have seat belts in there in case the guest needs to be secured. And what makes this different are these yellow, oversized wheels that come pre-inflated with air. They're rubber. And why this is such a cool piece of equipment, these top 3 pieces of equipment don't do well in sand. This one, all you need is a companion to tilt that chair back gently, push, and those wheels cut through hot sand like a warm knife goes through warmer butter. It's amazing. And when you get to see the expression on someone's face that always had the dream of putting their toes in the ocean or the sand, and either they were bedridden or chair-bound or just no mobility whatsoever, we do 2 charitable events down here at least every year for kids in South Florida with disabilities by the beach. And, you know, you get to see the expression on their faces, and it kicks up the fulfilling people's dreams aspect of our jobs just a little bit higher. Something special. Okay, back to reality. 3 sizes of wheelchairs, but there's 2 types that you should be aware of, and this is pretty easy. Self-propelled wheelchairs are exactly that. They've got the big wheels, so you can propel yourself as long as you have arms that are functional. The companion or transport chair, you'll note, only has smaller wheels, and it does have a belt to secure somebody. Most importantly, it has handbrakes, which the self-propelled does not. Now, this comes in handy if you find yourself on Lombard Street with a friendly companion. If you're on Lombard Street in San Francisco and you need one of these chairs and your companion doesn't like you, it's good to have the seatbelt. We mention this because the foldable scooter, which can hold up to 250 pounds a human being, only weighs 53 pounds. You can fit 4 or 5 of these things in a typical car trunk. It is required by Cunard Lines for their standard staterooms, okay? So if you ever have clients sailing on any of the Cunard fleet and they're in a standard stateroom, this is not a nice to have, it's a have to have. And when we talk about the breadth and scope of special needs, this is going to resonate with you, hopefully, because, a lot of folks these days are traveling with medication that requires refrigeration at constant temperatures. And unless you know better, you might think that, oh, gee, we got a mini bar in the stateroom on the ship, or there's a mini bar in the resort, the all-inclusive we're going to, or the inner-city hotel. That'll do. No, it won't. Because I've yet to see the first mini bar that's calibrated to tell you what the temperature is. It's always good if people are traveling with medication that requires constant refrigeration to get them the equipment that guarantees that. Everything from incontinence supplies. And it's funny, I've had agents tell me, oh, I don't have any disabled clients. You don't need disabled clients to use these services, because when you take people like your slow walkers, think about it. Their life at home is very different than their life on a big cruise ship. Okay? If they're working, probably don't have a physically strenuous job. If indeed they're home-based, what do they do in the morning? Bedroom, bathroom, dining room, kitchen, maybe some light shopping, a doctor's appointment or two. You put these people at some place like, I don't know, Moon Palace, the Grand at Moon in Cancun. You put them on any of the new build cruise ships except the boutique ships. It's a very different life. But one product that came on our radar, it's the very last image I'll call your attention to. Unfortunately, people that suffer from autism and chemotherapy, and we all know people in either one of those categories, unfortunately. Yeah, both of those maladies cause the patient to experience a phenomenon known as metal mouth, where everything you eat tastes like it's an all-you-can-eat buffet at a junkyard. It tastes metallic, and it's one of the major reasons why chemo patients shed as much weight as they do typically, as quickly as they do. Because if you do get metal mouth, you just don't want to eat. Mirror burst is a natural berry. And basically, you take one of the berries, chew it for about 30 seconds and swallow, and sit down. We did this with our advisory board last year at a meeting, our inner circle, and we gave them lemon wedges 30 seconds later. And the lemon wedges didn't taste bitter. And these are all travel industry executive, rank and file, travel advisors, cruise line executive, association executive, host people. It's a big umbrella, big tent we play in, and everybody was just totally blown away. So if you know anybody that's going through any of those aforementioned afflictions and they need a little help, we can help. Cruise lines love us. We work with everybody. And I'm excited to announce for the first time a groundbreaking new service, our white glove service. This is going to be, it's been piloted now in beta for almost 2 months, and it's now in place for personalized delivery and equipment demonstration. And we're doing it with Carnival, NCL, Radisson Seven Seas, and Oceania. In this particular case, for these 4 lines, where we're beta testing this, and it's working fabulously, because our business is only about service and special needs group. As your clients are entering port property, they'll be given a phone number to call or text. They will then be met at the terminal personally by one of our guest experience ambassadors, who will deliver and demonstrate the equipment, answer any questions your clients might have, and make sure that the clients know, especially if it's a scooter or a power chair, it needs to be recharged overnight. When disembarking, we suggest that the guests enjoy their last breakfast on board. They've been trained to eat frequently. And while they're finishing up breakfast, get a hold of us and we'll meet them whenever they tell us they're going to disembark. It's working like a charm, and it's really been well received. So we'll see about rolling this thing out on a broader service. But currently, for the 4 lines I mentioned, we're serving the following ports: Boston, Galveston, Fort Lauderdale, LA, Miami, Mobile, New York, Port Canaveral, Seattle, Tampa, Vancouver, with more to come. And we, like I say, we are not an authorized affiliate agent, authorized representative, any of the lines. Okay, especially the 4 that we're doing the white glove service for. We have great relationships in the industry, and we'll talk about a little bit more of that as we go. But we're beta testing this with these lines, and the guys in the suits said it's always good to put the disclaimer on. You listen to the guys in the suits. Last year, we served 215 metropolitan areas in 68 countries, so the footprint of Special Needs Group is truly global. And we own all the equipment. So if you have clients, what's it mean to you? Well, what it means to you is if you have clients that are departing out of Italy and terminating in Copenhagen, that the equipment can go one way. And also, I think it's important for you to know that our pricing includes the basic loss damage waiver. It's included in the commissionable amount. Any rental is commissionable, and there's no cap on your commissions. You get enough of that in other places. In Module 3, which doesn't translate well to webinar world, what we did was construct 4 different role-play scenarios where you'll be looking at images on the screen and listening to 2 different individuals having a phone conversation. One of those individuals is a really accessible, travel-savvy travel advisor. The other is either somebody with a special need disability or mobility issue or a loved one of somebody like that. And what we did, in addition to our own life experiences, is we went to our supplier buddies in the space. We went to our advisor friends who specialize in this space. And we wanted to find out what are the most frequent things that today's travel advisor can confront in their day-to-day business realities. And what we did was craft 4 different scenarios. It's my favorite part of the program. And we really flesh out best practices to really help you differentiate. And again, never overestimate anyone's knowledge. This is one of those things where my dad used to tell me as a kid, Jim, if you don't ask, you don't get. What I'm going to ask you to do, please, for the next, 30, 60, 90 days, pick a number, just stick with it. At the very top of your client interactions, if it's a previous client and you're reconfirming contact information, or if it's a prospect, hopefully a new client, and you're capturing their data right up front before you get into the where have you been, where do you want to go, how long do you want to be away, what do you like, before we get into any of that type of probing, just ask one question to set them up. Does anyone in your traveling party require mobility or oxygen assistance? That one question can end up yielding you a lot of incremental business because a lot of folks, as I mentioned earlier, don't know this exists. And we've had agents over the years, I've been asking agents to ask this question for a while now. We've had advisors, I should say, come to me at trade shows, or Andy, the guy that owns the company, or any of our travel industry ambassador team, and they say, you know what, we asked the question, and finally one day we're doing a family reunion, and we asked the question, and they said, you know, Aunt Edna wanted to come with us, but Aunt Edna uses oxygen, and she didn't think she could get it, so she wasn't going to go. Well, once the advisor explained that indeed we can take care of that, and we can ship the concentrator to Aunt Edna at home before she even goes to the airport, so she can make sure she's comfortable with the equipment, and we have time to adjust if there's an issue, which there rarely is. All of a sudden, Aunt Edna decided she could go. And guess who else decided they could go that wasn't going to go? Her husband, 3 kids, and the 3 kids' spouses. 8 incremental passengers as the result of one question. So it's a great question to ask. And just real quickly, I'm going to take you through some stuff about us. The Lions love us. We get a lot of referrals from them. And unfortunately, our headquarters are in Dania Beach, Florida, 10 minutes from Port Everglades. We have other offices in Seattle and over in Naples. But the headquarters office, when Harmony and Allure are in on the weekend, we're delivering equipment in very heavily branded Mercedes vans. And invariably, the office gets calls from people that have already boarded guests saying, I had no idea the ship was this big. Can I get one of your scooters? It's like we should be taking care of those folks before they get a chance to make that call. If you ever have a special request that's outside the norm, the staff, the team at Special Needs Group is truly remarkable. I've been privileged to work with these folks for 7.5 years. And I'll take it one further for you. I'm old school travel industry, and thankfully I've had the ability to impact some of our industry policies. If you have a client and their need is beyond your scope of comfort to take care of, please ask your client the best time for us to call them, and then simply call into Special Needs Group. Give us your name, your contact info, the client's name, the client contact info, when the client would like to be contacted. We'll do just that. as we hang up with the client, if indeed we took care of them and booked whatever it was they wanted and took the money for it, we're calling you to tell you what we did as we're sending you your soft copy email confirmation, and it's fully commissionable, folks. We're not an agency. We don't want your clients. You can keep them. You can have some of our book direct business. We don't really want any of them. To do business with us, it's real easy. Just come to our website, specialneedsgroup.com. If you'd like, you can go into the deep extension /advisors. Otherwise, just look for the advisor tab. You're going to need industry credentials, IATA, CLIA, True Number, whatever you use to claim commissions. Then you can take advantage of the accessibility certification program, and it's 65 minutes. All registered agents with Special Needs Group, whether you're certified or not, have access to our resource center, sales and marketing information, tips to help you grow your piece of the pie, do it maybe a little bit more effectively. The website's being done, thankfully, so this won't look like a 4th of July train wreck much longer, but anything you currently see that displays in red is exclusively for our certified accessible travel advocates. Hey, we're an industry that runs on acronyms, or else you wouldn't be called ASTA, right? Okay, Certified Accessible Travel Advocate, CATA. Okay, we got that. I mentioned the thing about book direct business. We really don't want them. Again, this is the old site, which is going to change in the next 45 days from the date of this broadcast. Consumers can rent on this left panel over here, which is really in reality its own screen. But we're telling them, would you like assistance booking your special needs vacation? Click here to find one of our certified accessible travel advocates. They go over to the slide on the right, the screen on the right, which is really its own screen. We just scrunched them up for the purposes of the presentation. They pop in their zip code, how many miles they want us to look on their behalf, and we spin them back the name, the address, the phone number, email address of their closest certified accessible travel advocates. And it's fun doing conferences and trade shows, and agents come up to us thanking us for the business. That's what happens when you get to 65 minutes. We'll do anything we can for you, including providing sales and marketing resources for all our registered advisors. If you're certified, you can get them personalized online. This is a great bookmark. Currently, it displays as our cruise accessibility tab. And if you click on it, you get a listing of the cruise lines, or a number of them. If you click on, let's say, Celebrity, you get a default to all the ships in the fleet. And you say, you know what, the Edge is supposed to be really spanking new hot. Let's check this out. Now, what we do is give you everything about the ship except pricing and itineraries, because they're pretty dynamic. But what we do give you that nobody else gives you for these cruise lines is a complete listing of all the accessible features on the ship, accessible staterooms, any special features that ship might have to help mobility challenged, special needs, or disabled guests. It's pretty cool. And we like to throw promotions out there at the time of this recording. We have one that's currently out there. If you get certified with us by October 31st of 2018, you're automatically entered into a drawing for an iPad. And if you happen to mess up and give us a booking between July 25th, 18 and October 31st, again, you're automatically entered into a separate drawing for another iPad. But if you're certified with us and you give us a booking, every booking counts as 2 entries because we love our certified agents. We'll announce the winner of Cruise World. You'll see us do Scooting for Charity. Actually, the first one that's photographed there was at ANACTA, now the ASTA Small Business Network annual conference, maybe about 5 years ago. We set up a little slalom course where you have to do weaves in and out these little 7-inch soccer cones, come down to the end, make a U-turn without knocking over the cones. But what I don't tell people, except my special French master, is I always tighten up one of the tracks, and I put all the suppliers on that track. So it's nice watching them lose their mind occasionally. I used to be a travel advisor. What can I tell you? It stays with you. And there's your very own Bob Duglin breaking all the rules, having too much fun. Love that man. We are privileged, honored, and proud to be the official mobility and special needs partner of ASTA and the ASTA SBN. And we were blown away in D.C. back in August when ASTA's Small Business Network, at that point was still NACTA, awarded us with the Niche Supplier of the Year, is voted on by the membership, so there's no greater honor when the trade recognizes you. And Travel Weekly in 2018 was kind enough. They bestowed 2 Magellans on us, a gold in the hospitality category and a silver in the cruise category. So thank you all from the bottom of our hearts, because we couldn't do this stuff without you. And if there are any questions, please remember there's no such thing as a stupid question, just dumb answers. So don't worry about your job. I'll try to do the best on my end. If you ever do need to reach out to us before Cara comes back on the line, there's the 800 numbers, the URL. And the reason we give you agents at specialneedsgroup.com that we need to change to advisors is we could give you real people's names like Jimmy Varela or Karen Leonard or Judy Yeomans or myself, even though I'm only a consultant. But you see, we all take days off or get sick occasionally, and that email box is constantly monitored. So that's your best bet for quick service unless you want to speak to someone. And like I say, we're looking forward to being able to assist you and your clients, because we're all about delivering an accessible world. So with that, Cara, take her away.
Thank you, Jim. It looks like our first question is going to be, where can I direct our advisors to see a list of all of the European cities where your services are available?
Okay, we don't have a list like that is currently available for viewing, but what I can tell you is this. If it has an active cruise port, okay, for passenger cruise ships, I'm not talking riverboats, I'm talking the big guys, because the riverboats present their own unique challenges. Anything that has a cruise port, we can service. We can also service the city, the surrounding area, and we do also service hotels worldwide. What we do with hotels typically is your guest will retrieve the equipment initially, 1 of 3 places, either bellman, concierge, or front desk, depending on the property. We advise you ahead of time. And it's real easy. If you have a specific city that you're curious about, feel free to give the staff a call. And if it's a city that's really off the beaten path, like you want to go to Kathmandu, not even Kathmandu, and it's really offbeat, we have a special concierge service for that, but that represents less than 0.1% of our transactions annually. Hope that helps, but we service all the major cities.
Thank you. So we know that you went over all of the cruise lines that you all work directly with, but would it be possible to meet a land tour passenger at their airport as well?
See, the airports since 9/11 have gotten really hinky, because we used to be able to deliver to airports. 9/11 changed all that. So typically what we'll do is deliver to a hotel, or we'll coordinate with the guest to find a convenient place to do the equipment delivery and also the retrieval. But airports are a no-no since 9/11, unfortunately.
All right, perfect. Do you service the cruise port in Charleston, South Carolina?
Well, off the top of my head, I can't tell you that we do. And please forgive me. I don't have as much information as I probably should about the product. Charleston's on the bubble right now. Could you just let us know, is there a specific cruise line that you're concerned about in Charleston? Because I think Charleston was one of those cities where the demand was so low. White glove service brings some incremental cost to us, and we don't pass that cost on. Okay, and I don't think Charleston was a great business opportunity for us. It was a big loss leader, actually.
It looks like they are referring to Carnival in Charleston.
Yeah, Charleston right now is not being serviced. That's one of the few cities we don't service. And like I say, it was just a question of the feasibility of the market. But I did the last thing. I used to be the director of marketing for Clear once in my life. And I took a look at what we are servicing, and we're servicing in excess of 98% of the cruise capacity that's out there. So it's going to be a very rare case where we can't take great care of you and your guests.
Thank you, Jim. It looks like that is going to wrap up on the questions that we have for today. Again, thank you to all of you for joining us. This webinar was recorded, so if anybody would like to listen to this presentation again or direct it to anybody else who they believe it might be beneficial to, this will be on our asta.org by the end of the week. And then I also want to go ahead and announce our lucky gift card winner, who is going to be Miss Angela Figuerera. I do apologize, Angelica, if I have butchered your last name, but again, Angelica Figuerera, you are our lucky winner for today, so I will be connecting with you via email after this webinar. Thank you, Jim.
I'll give you my home address so you can forward it.
Thank you, Jim, for filling Karen's spot. You did an absolutely amazing job. And
thank you so much. You're too kind.
Thank you. We hope that everyone has a wonderful remainder of their afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.